Hello everybody, I welcome you all in our today's course. Today we are going to continue our JavaScript Full Course. This is going to be the part 2. We have the part 1 already about 5 hours, and this is a continuation of the JavaScript Full Course. We have talked a lot about JavaScript in our part 1. So in this part 2, we are going to start with promises. We are going to talk about promises, the async, the JSON, a lot of other topics that we're going to discuss in today's course. So we are just going to quickly start. This is a continuation of our JavaScript part 1. So I'll just quickly go now and open the file we already used. We have a file that we use for our JavaScript first, the part 1 course. So I'll just quickly go now and open the file. I'll choose open folder. I'll go to my desktop where I have the file. Look at it, the JS course. I'll click it and open. Okay, I have to close my terminal. Okay, this is our course. I'll quickly do what next? I'll quickly do open with live server so that we'll have our application running. Open with live server to view our code. So now we are going to just quickly start explaining what is promises while our project is running. Let's start. Just quickly start. So now I'm just quickly going to explain what promises means. Promise is just like when you made a promise to somebody, you are going to do this at the end of this. You are going to do this at the end of this. So what the code is actually going to do is, the code is just going to promise, I'm going to return fulfilled at the end of this, or I am going to return rejected at the end of the process of this code. Promises is a method, is a feature in JavaScript that handles asynchronous functions, asynchronous operations. Like when you make a promise to somebody, you say, I'm going to come by 5 o'clock, or I will not make it. Like when you make this such promise in JavaScript or in programming, let's say in programming, when you make such promise in programming, what it means that you are going to return a result response. That's when if the code runs fine, if the code actually fulfilled. In promises, we have what we call the fulfilled, pending, and the rejected. So when the code runs, when it's fulfilled, it's going to return a response, a resolved response. If it's rejected, it's going to return rejected. So that's what the promise is mostly about. Okay, so now I will quickly show us the syntax, how to write promise. I know when we explain this orally, it may not really make much sense, but when we put it in practice, that's the better way to understand promises. So now let's quickly go, guys. I will quickly create let me show you a syntax how to create a promise. If you want to create a promise, let's use the const keyword. We're going to create we will say const, let's call it my promise, equals to, it uses the new keyword. Then you write the word promise in capital letter. If you write the capital letter, look at it there, then it takes in two parameters, the resolve and the reject. Okay, so now this is the promise. We have just written a syntax for the promise. So what you're going to do, you're going to run a code. Like when the code is successful, you are going to resolve it. When it's not successful, you are going to reject. Okay, so now let's quickly write a simple code. Let's say let's write a simple code. We are going to say const, let's just declare a random number using the math.random. So when the response is above 0.2 or 0.4, let's say 0.5, we should resolve, else we should reject. Okay, so let's simply look at it. So now let's call it my random number. We are going to say math dot random. We'll call this. Okay, so now we'll have the, if you check here, we'll have this number. Remember again, the promise returns a promise. It returns a promise. Okay, and I will show us what the promise is. What the response is when it resolves. So now when you come here, we'll have this this number, this variable. We can just quickly say if this is true, if it's above, let's say if this number is greater than 0. Let's say 0.4, we are just going to say resolve what? Resolve. Let's create a simple data. Okay, we are just going to resolve this number. What this resolve means, we are going to send it back when they call this promise. Okay, if this is to resolve this number, s reject. We are just going to throw new error. Or let's just put a simple string. New error. Promise rejected. Let's just return a simple error. So now what this means, that when this promise is successful, if this is true, it's going to resolve, and if this is false, it's going to reject it. And again, remember that promise returns what we call promise in JavaScript, where you will use either the .NET or use the async await to access the response. So now let me quickly show you this. Let's quickly console log this. Let's console log this my promise, and you see what is going to show you. I'm just trying to make it very simple and self-explanatory, where everyone will grab the message. So now you see uncut promise rejected. You see the promise is rejected, and the reason is because our random number must have been below 0.4. Okay, is it greater than 0.4? So now it's greater than 0.4, and this is the reason is being rejected. Okay, you see. So now let also see if it's less than. Let's keep trying again. We'll keep reloading until we get a number that is greater than 0.4. Let's try again. Okay, you can see here that promise rejected. Okay, promise was rejected. Let's reload again. Look at it, 0.41. That is our random number is greater than 0.4. That was why it was successful. Okay, look at it here, it's successful. Okay, so now if you want to access, if you look at the response is giving us here, is returning a promise. Look at what the response is returning here is a promise. You cannot just access the data and use it. You have to use the .then or their await. You have to await it or use the .then. So now this is a promise. Let's go back here again. This is a promise. Let's access our data from the promise. What you have to do is this promise.then. Use let's call the response. And let's put the catch. Let's put the catch to handle the error. Catch. Okay. Catch also takes in the error. Okay. So now let's console log this response here. Let's console log the response here. If you look at here, this is the response and this is the error. So if you look at here, this is. Now we are trying to use the .then to access our data from the promise. This function returns a promise, and that promise you cannot use it. You have to use the .then or the await or the sync. So now let me show you. This is my promise.then. Then we are trying to console log this response from here. You see, we were able to get this response. When it fails, we are going to catch the error. So let me go back again and let's reload. Promise is rejected. You see, it's giving us this. Let me put this again. promise is rejected because our number must have been greater than this. This statement must have been falsy, so promise is being rejected. It's being rejected. Okay, so now let's reload again until we get a positive response. Let's reload again. Promise is rejected. Look at it. Promise was successful and we are getting 0.73 because our response is now above 0.5, 0.4. So now if you look at here, you can see that this is saying when my random number is greater than 0.4, that means the condition here is true. Then resolve. The resolve means return that response. This my random number, resolve it, return it to the promise. Let it be the promise you are sending back to the user. So when you access it with the dot then or the async and await, you access your promise there. Okay, look at it. We have the promise, and as well you can also use what we call the set timeout. So this is a simple explanation of promises. We have just explained what promises is. Okay, so and as well you can also use, let's write you can also use the async and await to handle this promise, to get the response of this promise. So now let's quickly use, let's write a function. Now let's write a function. Let's explain what the async and await means. If you want to declare a function of async and await, you have to use this keyword async. Remember, async is a keyword in JavaScript. Don't use it as the name of your function. Let's call it let's get promise. We are using it in the traditional function, get promise. Now this is a function. How do we access this my promise? Remember, it's returning a promise. What you're going to do is, let's write a result const results result equals to my promise you see it here. Now this function, this is an async and await function. It returns a promise. So now we are calling this promise. This is a promise. We are trying to use the async and await to get this response from this promise. Now you make sure that your function where you want to use this promise, your function is an async function. Okay, so now this async and await, you use it to access your promise response. So now this is my promise, is a promise. Look at it. If I hover over it, you can see that this is a promise. Now we are waiting it and we'll pass it into this response. We are trying to console this response. Look at the response here. The response is 0.85 because our promise fulfilled. And again, in case if you are using, remember what we did with the dot then, we are able to use the catch to catch our error. Now if you want to, okay, and as well let me show you how you can also handle this using the arrow function. Let's write this function using, let's write this function using the arrow function. To make this an arrow function, to make this function async, you also have to add your async here. It has now turned to an async function. This is now async function. You have to add the async here. Remember, when we use our traditional function, we added the async from the very first beginning. What you have to do is, let's also copy what you have here. Let's copy this. Okay. Now let's call it, we are also calling, we are already calling this function. Let's go back to our code again. You see we have 0.74. Our promise resolved successfully. Now you should be asking, what if this promise reject? How do you handle the error? How do you handle the error? That's where we have our try and catch block. So now let me show you how to handle the try and catch block. And as well, promises can also return, you can also use the what we call the promise.or or promise.or settled. I think these are in the higher standard. I think by now you should focus on majorly the promise at the lower level so that you don't get things confused. Okay, so now let's quickly talk about the try catch block. If you want to call this promise in normal function and you want to use the await and you want to use the async and await, there is no way you can handle this error if this promise returns an error. There's no way you handle the error. The only way you can handle the error is using the try and catch block. Okay, when you are using the async and await and you want to call your a function that is a promise or an object that is a promise, any promise stuff that you are getting, any response promise you are getting, you have to use the try and catch block so that you are able to handle the error. So now let's quickly go to, let's try and see what the try and catch block. Let's use this. So this is the way the try and catch block is. So what I'm going to do is this. Let me quickly cut out this. I'll cut out this. So if I come here, I'm just going to write the same code. It's inside the try and catch block. What it means that try means inside of this, run this code. If there's any error, if this promise is successful, run this code. If there's any error, the catch will catches the error and throw out the error. Let's console log the error as well. So put it down here. Now we are calling this function. We are calling this function and the try and block is inside the function. You can as well use the try and block outside your function, but for the case, since you are using a wait, you have to put it inside a function that is an async. Okay, so now let's quickly do this. Let's quickly check our response and see what you are getting. This is try and catch. We are await. This is my promise. I will console the response. This is okay. It's correct. Oh, good. So let's continue refreshing until we get error. Let's try it. Yes, look at it. Promise was rejected. Okay, promise was rejected. So look at it. The error here shows that the promise, we are trying to console the error here. Promise was what? Rejected. You see now, with the async and await, we can handle the error. You can see that we can handle the error. And as well, let me also talk more about the async and await. Let me take this off. Let me quickly just console log it. If you want to use a simple async and await, let's put this here. A, B. If you are writing a function, remember any function that is asynchronous, any async function returns a promise, unlike normal function that is not async. Any asynchronous function returns a promise. Bear this in mind. When you are writing on your code and you put return, let me show you this. This is a normal function that is an async. But now, if you say return A multiplied by B, okay, and you call this function and say something like 2 and 4. In our normal function, if this function is not async, if you call this function, remember we are using as return keyword, we have to pass it into a variable. Let's call this, res equals to this. If you try to console.log res, our response here is going to give us what? 2 multiplied by 4. 2 times 4. All right. So if we console log this, now we have passed in our get promise function into this res. Let's call it response. Remember that this is a normal function which will return 8 to us, right? What's the issue? Oh, we are console logging rest down. So this is going to give us 8. You see it? This is going to give us 8 as our response. But if this response becomes async, it's no longer going to return this response this way. It's now going to return a promise to us. And again, then you must use either the dot then or the async and await to access your response. So let me make this function now asynchronous. Let me make it asynchronous. Then let's go and check back our response. You see what you're going to get. Now I'm calling this function, and I'm passing the parameters. I'm passing it into this variable called response. Look at it. It's a promise. Look at it. It's a promise. It's a promise that returns a number. Look at it. It's a promise. So let's go to our console. It's returning a promise. It's returning a promise. Let me clear this again. Is returning a promise. Look at it. And we have rejection. Is returning a promise because this is a promise here. Don't mind this. This is our first promise that is returning this one. But this is a promise from that console log. So what you're gonna do, if you have to access the response of this, you don't have to pass it into that variable. You just have to use the dot then. Okay, let's use the dot then. Let's do the dot then. You will now see that this returns a promise. Let's call it the rest. And here will be the catch. The catch also takes in the error. And let's put this here. Let's console log the response and see what you're going there. This is the response as well. We can console as well. Let's console log the the error here. Oh, sorry guys. Error. So now if you go to remember, once a function becomes async, it returns a promise. Okay, so when you come here now and reload, you see that we have the 8 is no longer returning that promise as a response because we have used the dot then to access our response from the promise function. When a function becomes async, it returns a promise. Okay, so now let's quickly talk about there's what we call error. Let's talk about types of errors in JavaScript. Let me quickly console log all of this. Let's talk about the types of errors in JavaScript. We have what you call the syntax error. We have the syntax error. Let me write about the syntax error. Syntax error. Syntax. So syntax error means when you write a wrong syntax, it will throw error. Okay, let's quickly say let's define let's x equals to 4 here. If you try to do something like console.log I'll put our and say 4, this is going to throw error, and this is going to throw error because the syntax is not correct. Let's see. So look at this syntax error, missing the closing bracket after argument list. Look at the syntax error. This is a syntax error. When you write a syntax that is not correct in JavaScript, it's going to throw that error. Look at it, the error has gone out again because we are missing that closing bracket. Okay, and this is a syntax error. So let me quickly console log this again. Okay, and another error again. There's another error called the reference error. Reference error. Reference error. So when you do when you try to reference a variable that is not defined or you don't have access to it, it gives you a reference error. So now let's console log console.log.s. Let's console log s. Remember, we don't have x anywhere here. There's nowhere we have x. We don't have access to this x anywhere. What was this? Let's console log. Oh, this is our promise. Let's comment it out. If you watch here very well, you can see that we don't have We don't have access to X anywhere. Now, X is going to throw the reference error. Look at it, reference error, because we don't have access to X is not defined. We don't have access to it again. And assuming this is we have a function, let's say we have a function and function xyz, and you try to, let's declare a function. Let's use const s equals to 7. Now we have, if you check here, if you look at this variable, you can see that we have declared s inside this function. And if you try to access this x from here, you are not going to get it. You are going to still get the reference error. And the reason is because you don't have access to this function here. This is where what you call scope comes in. Okay, but we are just going to simply talk about other types of errors. We also have there's other errors. We have custom errors. We have other types of errors. Okay, but we'll just quickly pick out these two to talk about them so that we'll run very fast. Okay, so you can read up other types of errors in JavaScript. Now, let's talk about there's what we call type conversion in JavaScript. Let's talk about type conversion in JavaScript. Type conversion in JavaScript. Let me write let x type conversion in JavaScript. In JavaScript, we have the implicit and the explicit type conversion. When you have something like let x equals to 5, and you say let y equals to, and you say let y equals to let's make this a string. Remember, x is a number and y is a string, and let's say let's call it 2. Okay, and if you try to do something like let z equals to x plus 2, x plus y, and let's console log this. Let's console log z. So from our previous classes, you expect that you already know that this is going to give us 52, because this is where type conversion comes in, what you call the implicit type conversion. Before JavaScript is going to concatenate this. It's going to treat this 5 as a string and concatenate it to 2, making it to give us a response of what? 52. Look at it, it's going to give us the response of 52, because what just happened is what we call cohesion. It's called cohesion in JavaScript. So in that cohesion, what we call the implicit conversion has happened. Is a kind of like inbuilt conversion. Implicit conversion has just happened there, and that's what we call cohesion in JavaScript. JavaScript has just converted this 5 into a string and concatenated it with these 2, making it to be 52. But if you are using other operators in JavaScript, other mathematical arithmetic operators in JavaScript, like the division, subtraction, and others, it will treat this as, it will convert this as a number. There's another implicit conversion again. So now we have this is plus. It treated this as concatenation. Let's use the division sign, and you see what will happen. It's going to treat this now. It's going to convert this into a number. Look at the 2.5. It has converted into a number. And as well, if you want to use the multiplication sign as well, it's going to convert it into a number. And now we have 10. You can see now that we have 10. Okay, this is implicit data conversion. Implicit conversion. You can call it cohesion as well. So now let's cohesion is conversion. Implicit conversion means when JavaScript itself converts a number converts a data into a different data type. That's implicit. We also have an explicit data conversion. This is when the user, you or the developer, convert a data type into another data type by yourself. Let's call this again. Let's use this again. Let's reuse this. Let's just copy this and come down and call it explicit conversion. So if you come here now and say, let's comment this. So if I want to convert this 5 into a string, okay, see what I'm going to do. I'm just going to write this is that 5 there, x is a number. And if I want to convert it into a string, I'm just going to use the string keyword and pass in the x. So now if I console log z, is going to give us what? A string, because we have used what we call the explicit conversion to convert. Is now a string. And if you check the data type, let's check the data type. Let's see, type of is going to be s. The type of z is going to be what? A string. Look at it, is now a string, because we have used the string constructor to convert this s into a string. So now again, let's also comment this 5, which is a number, and I'll comment the string. Let's use the number. Now let's put y here. So what you are trying to do is convert this string into a number. So if you check this here, it's going to give us what? Number. That is the type conversion. Is going to return a number. Okay. So let me quickly come down here again. So now I want us to talk about the scope. What we mean by scope in JavaScript. Scope is how you access a data in JavaScript, any data or any variable in JavaScript. Scope is how you access the availability of a variable. So you have the functional scope, have the global scope, and you have the local scope. So let's write this function. Let's write this here. var global scope. Let's call it global scope equals to 6. What you have just declared, when you declare function here, this is a global scope. When you declare function here with var at the very top of your code, it becomes a global scope. Every function or any code snippet can have access to it. So let me write this as a function. Let's write a function. Let's just quickly write a simple function. Let's call it function x. I want to make it to be very brief and quickly because of time. We have to run very fast. So let's say console.log. We are done with this. We need to comment this out. Let's comment this out. So now if you console log this, console.log. Let's console log this here. You see that we have access to that variable. And let's call this function s. We are going to have access to that function. So if you come here, you see that we have access to a 6. We have access to it as 6, as what? 6. This variable here is a global. It has a global scope. It has a global scope. But when I define a function inside, when I define a variable inside a function, let's say let y equals to func scope, or what you call the local scope. I will still show you the local scope. If you call it 4, you see that when I come outside here and try to console log y, I will not have access to the y. I will not have access to the y. Look at it. It's going to throw an error, reference error. Okay. So now, what this means that this has a function scope. We can only access this variable within the scope of this, inside this function. That's when you can only access this function. Sorry, that's when you can only access this. That's when you can only access this variable called y. You can only access this inside within the range of this function. Let's talk about the JavaScript modules and what you do with the modules. In the JavaScript modules, it helps you to import and export functions and variables from one file to another. For example, let's create a new file called export.js. Let's create a new file called export.js. We're going to create a new file called export code.js. So in this export code, what is going to happen is this: when you create a function here or a variable, you can export it and make use of it in our JS course file. In this file called js.js, jscourse.js, you can export function, and you can also export from this function as well, and also use it in this file. That's what it means. So let me give a quick a typical example. First of all, we have to go and import. Let's go and bring in the export code.js into our HTML file. Let's call export. Okay, so we have exported. And as well, when you are trying to import this in your HTML code, make sure that you use this attribute of type module. This will allow you to import and export your code in your JS course. This will allow you to import and export your functions and variables among different JavaScript files. And again, if you are using what you call the package.json, you can as well configure your HTML to use the module type. Okay, so but now we are not using the package.json. This is a simple JavaScript code. We are not using the package.json. Package.json is when you start using the npm, when you use the npm init to start up your JavaScript code. That's when you need the node runtime. Okay, but now this is a simple JavaScript. Let's quickly do this now. So we'll go back to this code. We have just created this export code.js. So let's write a simple function. Let's write a simple function. Let's call it my name. And we'll say this, or let's say return my name. My name is what? Let's just say return. Let's give it name here. I will say return name. Okay, so here I will say return name. You will know that you cannot use this function that is in export code.js. You cannot use it in this JS file. You cannot this JS course.js. You cannot use that function there. Assuming you say you want to use it here, you cannot use it. And the way to do this, we have different ways to do this. You can use the what you call the common JS method, which is using the require, where you use the export.module. This is a common way to do this in Node.js. If you're using Node.js, okay, if you're using Node.js, this is a common way to do it. I'm just trying to show you this so that when you start using Node.js, you will not get confused. Like you start thinking what you saw in the other place is different. So this is a common way to export and import your export functions and the variables in Node.js, particularly Node.js. That's the one we call you can, or when you are using the common JS type. This is the way to do. But here in this course, we are going to use the ES6, where we are going to use the import and export keyword. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is this. I'll quickly put in the export. I'll quickly write the export keyword there with at the very beginning of this function. Now I have exported this function. Okay, so let me show you now. If I want to make use of this function in this page, in this file, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write import. Then I'll put it in a curly braces and say my name and do from, put the directory from where, JS code. So I think let's add that. So now we have just imported this file, and how do we start using it? Remember that this code is a function. So what I'm going to do, I want to pass it into a variable. Let's pass it into a variable, and let's say let's result equals to, I'll call this function and passing the arguments. I'll say tempo. That's my name. Okay, so now I will try to console log this result, and let's see what you get. I'll pass in this here. So let's go to our browser again and see. So you see that I'll have tempo. And how did this happen? We imported this. Remember, I put this inside a curly braces. What this means is that this is not a default export. I'll show us what default export. This is not a default export. When we are exporting a function, like you are just exporting a function that is not a default function, a default export, make sure you put it in a call inside the curly braces, and make sure that the name also aligns with what you have here, this same name here. That's when you are not using the export default. Okay, so now if you check here, we have just imported this function, and I can as well write another function and say, let me write another function. Calculate, let's call it car, and let's say A and B. So we are going to say now return A multiplied by B. All right, so if I come here again, and as well I can also import this function. I'll come here and I'll just put it inside the same curly braces. This is car. So what I'm going to do, if I call this car, let's remove this thing. Okay, let's just so what I'm just going to see car results. Let's call it car. It's going to be lowercase car results. So I'm going to call that car, and I'll pass how many arguments. The 2 arguments is expecting 2 arguments, has 2 parameters. So I'm going to say 2 and what 4. All right, so now if I try to console log this car result, you see that, let's see what you're gonna get. Remember, we have imported it, we have called it here, and we are passing the 2 arguments. So we'll pass into a variable and console log the variable. So let's see what you're gonna get. You see here, I'll have what 8. You see, we have 8. So again, let me also show you what you call the default export. Assuming you want to export a lot of functions, and export default. What you're gonna do, you have to pass all this in. Let's remove this. You just have to put this in an object, export it as an object. Let me show you. Just export this as an object. Okay, so you can see now we have removed those export keywords. Now we are using export default. I want to show us something that is different so if you come to this file, look at this very well. We have exported this. Look at the way we exported. You are using the export default, and we are trying to export it as an object. Okay, so remember, we have to access an object. You have to use the dot notation name. All right, so when you come here, we have come to this function. Now let me show you. Let's go to our browser. I want to show you something. You see that there's an error that is happening already. Requested module does not provide an export named. So now we have to import this. Let's import this. Look at what is going to happen. Let me copy this down, and I'll console log the other one. So what I'm going to do is here, I'll come here now and call this my func export. All right, I've just imported what I'm going to do now. If I want to get access to each of those functions, I will just call this and put the dot, and same thing will happen here. You see, so now let's go. We have called it. Look what is happening here. We are importing this object. That's what it means. We are just imported this object, and we'll do inside that object. Remember that I'll have my name function inside it, and we'll have also the car function inside it. So we are going to do dot. Remember the way we use our object, dot. The object name dot, the name of the property you want to access. So we have accessed those functions and passing the arguments that they are expecting. So let's see what happened here. You see now that our function, our code is running fine. Now look at it. We have it now. You see now, have it. Our code is running fine now. You see. So this is a very simple way and quick way to do this. There are also a lot of ways you can do this. Okay, you can also make more research to get more knowledge about this. Is a very simple and quick way to import and export your code and your functions and variables in JavaScript. Okay, so now I want us to quickly talk about, let's quickly talk about the JSON. What is JSON? The JavaScript object notation. Let me write JSON. JavaScript object notation. So what is this JavaScript? What is this JSON in JavaScript? Let me quickly explain. JSON is just a standard file format and data interchange format that uses human readable text to store and transmit data objects consisting of attribute, value pairs, and arrays. Remember, it consists of what? Attribute of value pairs. Okay, so now let me show you a typical example of what JSON looks like. Assuming you are passing an object inside a JSON, this is the way it's going to look. Let me show you what it's going to look like. Name, tempo. If you watch very closely, you will see that there is a difference. Let me rearrange this so that you can see this very well. If you watch this very well, I cannot write this there because this is a JSON. You see, it's not it's throwing error. This is a JSON file. This is a JSON file. Okay, so if you look at this now, you can see that it's very much different from our normal object. You can see that the key is also enclosed with a double quote. You can see it here, and the object is inside a string as well. So what it means that JavaScript JSON accepts a string only. Like any data you are passing into your JSON, you must convert it into a string. So now let's quickly write a simple let's write a code. Let's say my JSON equals to, I want us to write a simple object. Then we'll pass it, we'll convert it into a JSON file. Name, tempo, occupation, I'll say developer. So now if you want to pass this, let's say const converted JSON. If you want to convert this code into a JSON, how do you do it? That's the first question you're going to ask. There's what we call we have the JSON.stringify and we have the JSON.path. All right. So now if you are converting this is an object. If you want to convert it into a JSON, you have to use the stringify method. So we're going to do JSON.stringify. Okay, we're passing this variable, this as a variable. We have simply this is now a JSON file, converted JSON. This variable is now a JSON file. So let's console log it and see what you're gonna get. So if I pass this into here now, and I'll go here, you see that, look at it. You see the way it is. The name is now enclosed with double quotes. The same thing with the occupation. This is now a simple JSON file. It's not a simple JSON file. And let me show you something. If you want to retrieve this file now, if you want to retrieve it, look at it, is in the format of JSON. If you want to retrieve this, you have to also, this is an object. If you are retrieving it now, this converted JSON variable, if you want to make use of it in your JS file, you have to also retrieve it. Remember, it has been converted into a JSON. If you want to make use of it, you have to pass it into a normal object. You cannot just use this now. You cannot just use it in your code and it will run. No, you have to pass it. There's what we call JSON.pass. So now let's write another function. Passed. Let's call it passed JSON. So what do? You're gonna do JSON dot pass. This thing is very good. It's very, very important when you start working with data you retrieve from your APIs and other. It's very, very important. It's very, very important. So now, if you look at this, passed JSON. All right. If we can try to, let me comment this. Okay, let me just leave it there so that we'll see the difference between the JSON and the one we have passed. So if you look at this now, you see that this one is the converted JSON. This is the JSON file. Now we are trying to reconvert that JSON file into a normal object. So we are consolidating the two. I want us to see the difference. So let's go to our code now. You can see the difference. This first one is the JSON file. The name, the keys are enclosed with the double quotation, while this one is a normal object. You see, that's the difference. Even if you want to do it with arrays, if you want to do this arrays, you have to also do the same thing. You have to convert it as well. Let's say let's write a simple array. Tempo developer. This array, you have to also convert it into a JSON before you start making use of it. You have to convert it into a JSON as well. Let's call it converted. I'll pass this into this here. Then I'll try to console log this. I'll try to console log this converted array. You see what's going to happen. This is the array now. I have to retrieve it. You have to convert it into a string before you pass it into a JSON. Okay, so this is a simple way to store your data into a JSON and also retrieve your data from a JSON. You use the JSON.string file to store the data and use your JSON.pass to retrieve the data. So now let's quickly talk about the web APIs. That's what to call web APIs. Web APIs. That's the local storage and the session storage. We also have the cookie, but here we are going to talk about the local storage and the session storage. So the local storage, let me show. I will also differentiate what the difference between the local storage and the session storage. So now let me talk about local storage. So how do you start using this local storage? If you want to use a local storage data, you're going to write local storage dot set item. You put in here, it takes in. Look at what you are doing here. This is a keyword. This is the way you store your data into a local storage, and I will show you also what local storage means. This local storage now, it helps us to store data on our web, on the web page. Like when you come here, you can store your data. When you go to this application, now you see where we have our local storage. Look at local storage here. You can store data here as a it will act like a simple data file storage. It will just act like a simple database, but it's running on this web page. All right, so I'll just quickly show us. If I store this data here, this local storage set items accepts two parameters. The first parameter is the key. That is the name that you want to use and store the data into your local storage, and the second one is the data you actually want to store. So now let's write a simple data here where I think let's copy this object. Let's copy this object. Let's call it obj. So now this is an object. Okay, if I copy this, remember, if you want to store your data in your local storage, you have to also convert it into a string, and you can do that with the help of the JSON.string file. All right, so what you're going to do is the first one. Remember I said the first one is going to be the key. The key, that's the name that you want to use to store your local storage, to store your data in your local storage. I'm just going to call this my obj. All right, so you put your comma, then put the data you want to store. If I put If I put this data this way, it's not going to work. I have to, this is an object. It cannot, you cannot store it just like that. You cannot store a straight object in your local storage. You have to pass it into a string. So we can do that with our JSON .stringify method. So if you do this, you just simply pass in this object into this JSON.stringify. So now let's quickly go to, we have stored this data. This is a simple object. We have stored it inside our local storage. So how do you now see your local storage? If I console log this, it's not going to give me that local storage. There's a way to access storage, okay? Storage or data. So there's a way to access. If I console log this now, it's not just going to give me that data. Let me show you. It's not going to give me that data. Let's go here. Let's go back to our console. Undefined. It's not going to give me that data. All right. So let me show you something. To get this data, okay, first of all, let me show you. Let's confirm that our data is successfully stored on our local storage. And how do you do it? When you come to this web page, let me close this and start afresh. If you come to here, open your inspect. When you open your inspect, you will not come to console. This is a console where we view our JavaScript codes, you know. So how do you view this local storage? Come to application, this application tab. Come to this application tab. When you open your dev console, dev2, you come to this application tab. When you click it, you are going to have your, look at storage parts. Look at this place called storage. Under this place called storage, you have your local storage and the session storage. You have your cookies, web SQL, index. But now we are concentrating on the local storage and the session storage. Click here to expand it. When you expand it, you click this. You see that what is happening here is what is simply happening here is making reference to this URL that we are using. This localhost. This is a simple localhost URL. Is making reference to this. And look at the URL here. It's referencing to, assuming this web page is hosted, it will also point, this URL will point to our normal domain. Okay, so if you come here and you see that, look at what you have here, the key, which is the name of the data we store. Look at it there, my object, my obj. Look at it here, my obj. Look at it, my obj. And what did we store there? We stored a simple JSON file inside our local storage. Look at it there. We have this data here. Look at it. We have this data. Look at it. We have the data now. Let's quickly go back and still change the name. You see that it's working very fine. Let me put my last name. If you come here now, you simply reload. Let's clear this and reload. You see it. We have my name here as Indigo. It has changed. So let me show. I did something to clear this. If you want to clear this, local storage, just click this button, this clear. Or if you clear it, you have wiped out that data from your local storage. It's no longer there. That key does no longer exist. Okay, until you reload, it does no longer exist. If you clear this now, it has wiped out. If I clear it, it has wiped out. I have to reload this again for it to come back, and I'll have access to it again. Look at it. Okay. This is a simple way to store our data in our JSON. Sorry, this is a simple way to store our data in our local storage. And remember, local storage is just a simple web API. It's acting like a simple database that you use to store your data on the web, on your web page, this simple web page browser. All right. So if I go now, I want to access this data. Remember what I showed you earlier. If I want to access data on our console, we don't have access to it. Look at this local storage data. We don't have access to it. And how do we do this? There's a way to have access to it. That's what to call the local storage.get item. You use the type get item. Let me show you something. Let's also just copy this down. We'll call it get local storage data. Get local storage data. And what you're going to do is local storage get item. Get item. It accepts only one parameter. You remove this. It accepts only one parameter, and that parameter is just the name, the key of the local storage you have stored. So you just now we have just get the item. We have gotten root to our local storage, the data we have already stored. So let's just console log this now. If I console log this now, you see that we'll have access to it. If you look at it, we don't have access to it, and it's being returned as a JSON file. It's returned as, look at it, the name are enclosed in a double quote. So how do you do it again now? You have to also pass this. Let's call this, let's pass it into our normal object. You have to do dot pass. You have to do dot pass and pass it. Now you can see that it now returned a normal object. You see, it now returned a normal object. So, and as well, there's also what you call the local storage dot remove item. If you want to remove this item, you will just simply do, let me show you what you're going to do. Local storage dot remove item. It's just going to take in the key. The key, that's the name of that local storage that we have stored. If I console log this now, you see what's going to happen. It's undefined, but let's just, we don't need to console log this. You just have to bring it out here and call it anywhere you want to make use of it. Maybe you want at the point that when your code runs to a certain point, you want to remove, like when you start working on the authentication of your application, okay, you want to check if the user logs out, you want to remove the token. Maybe if you store your token in your local storage and the user is already in the web page, when the user clicks logout, you want to remove that token. So now let me show you something. Let's quickly create a simple button, and I'll show you how to remove the local storage. So now let's come here and say inside a div, this is our div, this is let's just quickly come here and say, let's create a simple button. I will call it logout. All right, so let's call it a logout. It's just a simple button. Let me bring it down. So if you check here, I have this logout button. Let me give it a simple margin so that it will shift that stuff up. Let's give it a simple margin top 20 pixel. Just want to push it up so that we'll have enough space to work. So if you come here, this is a logout button. All right, so I want us, what I want now, when you click this button, I want to remove that local storage you have stored here. Okay, so is there any way to push this up a little? So if I come here now, let's give it an ID of what? Logout. So I'll go to our JS file. I'll just get access to it. I'll just bring it in. I'll use the const logout btn, and I will now say equals to document dot get element by ID. I'll pass in the name of that ID. Now what I want to do is, when you click this button, I want it to remove that local storage that we have stored. Okay, so now if you come here, I'm just going to say on click, let's just write this, on click of this add event listener, I'll just say the event, which is click. Then I will say here I'll pass in a callback function. Let's say a callback function. I'll simply say when you click this, I'm passing a callback function. I'll just put this local storage or remove. All right, so now we have stored this data, this obj data, we have stored it in our local storage. Let's remove the get. Okay, and we also have the get now. Okay, so let me show you. I've just brought in this button. When you click this button, I want it to remove that local storage. So let's go back again. Let's reload and see what's going to happen. So if you watch here very well, you see that we have, let me reload this. We currently have our my obj data stored in our local storage. So if I click that button, I want it to wipe that thing out. I want it to remove it. Okay, so let's see, let's confirm if this works. So if I click this now, you see it has removed it. Let's reload it again. If I click this, it's going to remove it. Let's reload it again. We'll have this key again. If I click this now, I'm telling it remove the remove this. I'll just click remove, click log out. It has removed that data. And as well, if you are using a data from your backend, once you remove it, it's not coming back to that place again. It will not come back like the way when you refresh it to still come back. No, when you remove it, it's going to because your backend is actually going to need a fresh token. So if you're using token to do log out and login, if you want to click that log out, it's to remove that token and you cannot use it again to access the web to pass your authentication. Okay, so this is just a simple tutorial about the local storage. All right, and we have just shown the local storage and the JSON, how to use both of them. Okay, so for today, this is the end of our course for today. Please, if you have a comment, you have a question, any observation, please make sure you leave a comment below. I'm going to answer you all. Wait for us next week. I'm going to be dropping new courses every week. If you have any question, make sure to reach out to me. And don't forget, you can also make research and get more knowledge about this. This is just a simple crash course. I'm just teaching about JavaScript. All right, you can as well use the MDN, that's the Mozilla Developers Network webpage to learn more about JavaScript. Okay, and I would like to hear from you. If you have any question, reach out to me, leave a comment. I'm going to answer you guys. Okay, thanks for watching.